Happy 2025. I hope some of you survived National Quitters Day. This past Friday is kind of the traditional average day. Most people give up on their New Year's resolutions. So if you're still holding strong, well done. Anybody already done? Maybe you don't want to out yourself. Anybody staying strong with your workout routine? We applaud you. Despite it being National Quitters Day this past Friday, I have a bit of an innate allergy to New Year's resolutions. I think it's my rebellion against like the big industrial wellness complex. Like, how many times can I see a Peloton or a Planet Fitness ad or Apple trying to sell me on something? I just don't want to do anything. I'd rather sit on the couch after all of these ads coming in. Again, that's just my little rebellion. Don't let that taint your idea of New Year's resolutions. Because even if I refuse to make New Year's resolutions, I do get the impulse. Like, I understand that idea. The new year feels like this time to wrench yourself free from the bad habits you developed over the previous year. It feels like the time to recalibrate to the life you want to live. It feels like the time to become the person you want to be. Because we are all becoming something, right? Like, that's just the human experience. We grow, we change, we evolve. The question is not, am I becoming? The question is, who or what am I becoming? Contrary to popular belief, you and I are not independent free thinkers forging ourselves in a vacuum. We are not people of our own making. We are the complex amalgamation of environment, of culture, of parenting, of economics, of social circle, and experiences. Each of us sit at the center of countless influences. Our emotions, our preferences, our dispositions, our morals, and our habits are being formed and reformed again. In many ways, we're kind of like rocks at the center of countless currents being shaped and molded by the waters of influence. And in this moment in particular, in our age, one of the most prevalent influences in our lives is the device in our pocket, or maybe the device in our hand, or maybe the device we're watching on. Like, you and I all know the unparalleled influence of technology on our world, right? Like, that article has been written countless times. That prompt has been said and told to us, and yet we often fail to notice how we are being changed by technology. We find ourselves the focus of social media empires, dedicating almost limitless funds to keeping your attention, to keeping you compulsively scrolling. Imagine a team of people sitting in a room for 40 hours a week scheming on how to distract you. I am easily distracted, so that is a horrifying thought. That someone is sitting in a boardroom with a whiteboard going, how do we steal Alex's attention? We find ourselves guided by the mysterious algorithm, always ready to offer a new recommendation, right? Watch this video, listen to this artist, read this tweet, buy this thing. We are inundated with ads almost constantly. It's believed we are somewhere around 4,000 to 10,000 ads per day. Selling us pharmaceuticals we don't need, cars we can't afford, and food we probably shouldn't eat. And we're told these are just ads, just links, just paid promotions. But let's call them what they are. They are an attempt at mass behavior modification. Tech philosopher Jaron Lanier observes this: what might have once been called advertising must now be understood as continuous behavior modification on a titanic scale. Every 10-second ad tells you how to think, what to believe, behave, how to shop, who to vote for, and how to live. These devices and platforms shape us in ways we often fail to notice. Dr. Maria Penatoti is a psychologist who researches user experience. And she has this fascinating article I came across about 2 weeks ago about how apps and digital products are designed so that they change our behavior in a predetermined way. She mentions 5 common design features meant to elicit a very specific response in the human being. The first being that apps will use unpredictable notifications to tap into that sense of anticipation. Like, what am I missing if this is coming up right now? What's out there that I'm missing out on? Second, they'll introduce that tailored notification, which is harder to ignore when it's personalized, right? Like, you forgot this thing in your cart. You've been tagged in this photo. So-and-so just posted. Third, apps are often designed to interfere with deliberate decision-making. YouTube, Hulu, and Netflix just queue up the next episode. Like, it's just right there. You don't have to do anything to keep viewing. You all know that impulse at 11:50 p.m. The next one's starting, and you're like, I guess I'm still watching. Fourth, many online platforms are built with a sense of partial goal fulfillment. This is especially true in video games, where you get close to completing the goal and then something new is introduced. You're like, I was just going to finish that, but there's a new one, there's a new thing to get started on. And fifth, many apps are designed to exploit user vulnerabilities. The algorithm adapts to your spending preferences, finds out you got a soft spot for shoes, and all of a sudden, shoes are everywhere you go on the internet. It's designed to exploit the weakest parts of who you are. Jonathan Haidt's widely influential book is making its rounds everywhere right now. It's called The Anxious Generation. He argues that when teenagers got smartphones, there was an actual rewiring of the adolescent brain and limited attention. An actual rewiring of our brain chemistry. Now, I feel a bit like an alarmist, like the guy up here ranting about kids and their cell phones. I just think, and I will take the risk and hear it sounding like an alarmist, I just think maybe I should personalize it, I have not given enough critical attention to how I am being changed by the tech in my life. Because it's so easy to think that these devices in our hands are just tools. That they're just devices that we shape, we control, we use. But it's not that simple. John Dyer, in his book From the Garden to the City, makes this case that technology is never neutral. He writes this: whenever we use tools, from shovels to books to phones and virtual reality, regardless of whether you use them for good or evil, the act of using them forms us physically, mentally, spiritually, and relationally. The problem with thinking of technology as neutral is that doing so often makes us miss all the non-neutral ways its presence is in our lives and affects us. The iPhone in your pocket is shaping you. Your Instagram account is changing you. Your screen time is developing you. Your viewing habits are molding you. I could go on, but I think we all know at some level that our devices are having an outsized influence on our life. We just don't know what to do about it. We find ourselves navigating what we've deemed a digital Babylon. Like the ancient Israelites, we find ourselves in a foreign world, a foreign language, of foreign customs and foreign gods, desperately trying to remain faithful to our God. And And so at the front end of 2025, we want to have a conversation about technology's role in our life. And I want to be clear about this, if I can maybe come clean. I'm not offering this as an expert leading you into the promised land of digital minimalism. Like, I come as someone struggling to free myself from the snares of YouTube, of social media consumption and fragmented attention. A few weeks before Christmas, I was preparing this talk, and I think I read like 20-some articles on the effects of social media on mental health. And then the holidays hit, and my screen time almost tripled. Like, I knew all the effects, and yet when the time came and I was left to my own devices, I went to the place I always go, just scrolling. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just another exile trying to figure out how to follow Jesus in this digital Babylon. I also think it's clear that you hear that the aim is not to be a community that gives up Wi-Fi, or to be a community that turns all of our smartphones in for flip phones, or to create some shame around watching TikTok videos, or in my case, YouTube. I wrote this teaching on a laptop. My notes are on an iPad, so like there's a bit of a hypocrisy in this, I recognize. I know that we know technology can be incredibly useful. I think the aim of this is for us to become aware of how dangerously influential it is. The aim is that we take a critical look at our lives and our engagement to ask the question, how do we remain faithful? Faithful in a world of rapidly shifting language, economics, customs, norms, and dare I say, gods. What does it mean to be a faithful disciple of Jesus in a digital age? Because we want to be a community of intentional formation in an age of compulsory scrolling. We want to be deliberate about the type of people we are becoming and the shape of our character. We want to be like Jesus, the truest human being who has ever lived. And to undergo that transformation and to take seriously the invitation to be Christ's disciples, I think it takes a serious audit of the influences we are under and serious reflection on God's way of life. So that is the aim today. And to do so, I want to turn to Romans chapter 12. So if you've got a physical Bible, we'd love for you to turn there. If you're still using your phone, we'd also love you to turn there. This is not going to be a place of shame where you're, turning in your phone. But we want to go to Romans chapter 12 because it's actually the only spot in the New Testament where Paul mentions the internet. That's a joke. That's a joke. If you're new, the internet is not mentioned in the New Testament at all. Much of this series, and really much of the Christian life generally, calls us taking a serious look at the biblical text, carefully discerning its aim, and then in partnership with the Spirit, applying its instructions. So as we think about being disciples in a digital age, this will take careful consideration, discernment, and a bit of Spirit-led creativity, because Paul doesn't address TikTok in the New Testament. I know he just wasn't up to date. So let's look at Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, where Paul tells followers of Jesus to take stock of the influences shaping their lives and instructs them to commit to nonconformity and the work of holy attention. Paul writes this: "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy." Now, quick, everything in Romans' point has been an exploration of God's mercy revealed in the actions of Jesus. So we're 12 chapters in. Everything prior has been about God's mercy coming to humanity. He writes, "Offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." More on that in a bit. Verse 2, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you will be able to test and approve what God's will good, pleasing, and perfect will. Paul touches on this idea that we are shaped by the environments we inhabit. What surrounds us has this way of seeping into us. There's almost this cultural osmosis, if you will, where willingly or unwillingly, we take on the beliefs, behaviors, and worldview of the world around us. One commentator translated this verse, "Do not be squeezed into the mold of this world." What is the technological mold that you and I are being squeezed into? What is the pattern of digital engagement that we might be conforming to? Answering those questions will take a bit of a personal and cultural awareness to determine how we've been unconsciously conformed to the digital norms, but it also might take someone asking you hard questions. Like, do you find yourself shopping habitually and carelessly? Do you find yourself compulsively scrolling, your attention scattered and fragmented? Do you find yourself engaging with illicit and problematic content? Do you only engage with people and information that supports your own ideas and viewpoints? Do you find yourself neglecting responsibilities or relationships because of technology use? Do you neglect your health and well-being because of the device in your pocket? Left unchecked and undisciplined in the way we use our phone, we can be left a shell of the person we want to be. And to resist the inertia of our digital world, we must be committed to non-conformity, to digital distinction, that we might be differentiated in our digital habits. Paul says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world. Maybe said differently, commit yourself to being distinct from the patterns around you. This is non-conformity and digital distinction. That when we make a commitment to simply being different, we prepare ourselves for the thousands of little choices that will soon confront us. This will leave us often feeling out of sync with those around us. But we are making this commitment for the sake of transformation. We commit ourselves to non-conformity and digital distinction. We have to say, there's going to be some things that I'm not going to engage with for the sake of becoming like Christ. Verse 2 again, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, Paul uses two different Greek words here that are roughly synonymous in meaning. We translate those conform and transform. His point, which I've alluded to, is that we are all becoming someone. The question is who? And Paul writes to the Roman church so that there is no question about God's intention for humanity and Paul's own hope for who they will become like. Chapter 8, verse 29, for those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. We're either being shaped in the world's mold or in the way of Jesus. And the invitation of Christianity, and thus the invitation of this church, is to build your life brick by brick, piece by piece, habit by habit, decision by decision on the foundation that Christ has died, Christ has risen, and Christ will come again. Because it's our conviction that Jesus embodies the best of humanity, revealing the best way to be human. That he really was God in the flesh, come to show us what God is really like and to make us his disciples. And the way we undergo that transformation of becoming like Christ, according to the Apostle Paul, is to set our minds on the ways of God. And this is an unsurprising place to start, right? Paul could have come up with a bunch of, new ways, but he's like, it starts in your head. Because we all know in so much of who we are, what we do and what we are becoming begins internally, with our emotions, our expectations, our imaginations, our memories, and our inner dialogue. The data we use to navigate this world is held in our minds. And if the recent emphasis on mental health has shown us anything, it's that these things we hold in our mind can be false, can be harmful, they can be enslaving. Our neural pathways, our memory banks, our default assumptions, our emotions have been shaped and wired by all kinds of factors. They can be shaped by the kindness of a father or the critique of a mother. They can be shaped by the attentiveness of a teacher or an embarrassing moment in 3rd grade. They can be shaped by a traumatic experience or by an affirmation you received in college. Likewise, to return to thinking intentionally about technology, the compulsive scrolling we so often do has a way of shaping our minds based on the whims of Silicon Valley, the TikTok algorithm, or Amazon's recommendations. The point is that you and I need to do the work of healing our minds. Transformation, as Paul calls it, or as psychologist Eric Johnson puts it, Christians have to rewire their brain for access and glory. To rewire our brains for access and glory. Our minds, shaped by all manner of experiences and influences, must be rewired to focus on God. This is the hard work of investigating your assumptions about who God is. It's the hard work of renewing your mind, investigating your thought patterns, and committing to truth, putting our attention where it should be. Paul will write in Philippians 4, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. Is Twitter true? Is Netflix noble? Is Tinder pure? Is Instagram lovely? Is TikTok admirable? What takes up the processing power of your imagination? You were designed to access glory. What have you settled for? Andy Crouch, a theologian for Praxis Enterprises, he lives by this rule of life regarding his mind. And he has this short little statement on his rule of life for his imagination. And I love this. He writes, instead of having our imagination saturated by media, we seek to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. We commit to establishing structured limits for our use of screens and our consumption of entertainment in quantity, frequency, and moral character. We have a part in this transformation of being intentional with what fills our minds. And maybe the most basic definition of prayer might be drawing our mind to God. What we're talking about is holy attention. Holding in our mind the character, faithfulness, and love of God. This is learning to keep God at the forefront of our thoughts. To often and regularly redirect our minds to Him, to take the initiative in our minds and to cultivate attention set on Him. It's the work of holy attention, and the Spirit has this way of using a holy attention to transform the entirety of our lives from the inside out. The most pressing challenge in all of this is not thinking about God. Shocking as it is, I can pretty clearly get you to think about God by just saying God. The most pressing challenge for you and for me is cutting the distractions. Neil Postman wrote a book in 1985 called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And I can't think of a more prophetic title. You and I were designed to access glory. What have we settled for? Faithfulness in the digital age will require this commitment to digital differentiation and a commitment to the work of holy attention and a willingness to put everything on the table. Let's return to verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Paul frames everything we've talked about with this strange phrase, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, this is an almost nonsensical command, in part because one of the definitions of a sacrifice is not living. But it's this vivid, if not shocking idea, hold nothing back. It brings to mind the words of Jesus in Luke 9, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. There can be this tendency to separate the ideas of worship from those of discipleship. Like, worship is what we do at the beginning of service. We sing God's songs to God. And discipleship is what we do when we read the Bible. Maybe we listen to a podcast, or we attend a small group, or we get a mentor. We tend to bifurcate these ideas, keeping them separate in our head. But notice how Paul pulls these two ideas of discipleship and worship together. Like, the songs we sing are important. They guide us and they focus our attention on who God is. But the true measure of our worship is not our playlist. It's not our worship experience. It's our lives. Our living for God, discipleship, is our adoration of God, worship. This is adoration of God in song and in deed. It's what Paul calls true worship. To be a living sacrifice is to step into that space of offering our whole life in worship to God. And this leaves us to search every corner of our life, from our occupation to our emotions, from our spending to our relationships, from our screen time to our habits. We search every corner of our life for new ways to surrender. We search for new ways to be a living sacrifice. Worship team, if you will return, that would be really helpful as I bring us to a close. So here we are at the edge of a new season. In many ways, this is a journey to discover how we might be a community of intentional formation in an age of compulsive scrolling. That we might figure out, or maybe not figure out, but we might journey to become people like Jesus. And I think that means we've got to be willing to sacrifice whatever device, whatever app, whatever digital habit is running counter to the ways of Christ. This will require some kind of digital sacrifice for each of us. So over the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to offer a prolonged conversation on how we might be more faithful to Jesus in the digital space. It will take 6 weeks, probably longer, if I'm honest, to think comprehensively about our interactions with technology. And so over the next 6 weeks or so, we'll be probably a little bit more practical with our thoughts or advice. But I do want to maybe set up these conversations with just a few each Sunday, even this Sunday, there is a phone locker at the back of the room. Just a little locker over there, has a key, you throw your phone in, take the key with you. This is just simply an attempt to give you 90 minutes phone free. I don't know about you, but that doesn't happen very often for me. The lyrics are on the screen. If you need anything from the notes, we can give them to you. If you need to give, figure it out. We want to give you the opportunity to experience just a few minutes untethered to anything and open to what God might be leading us to. Cassie wanted me to make this disclaimer. I will have my phone on me just in case of emergencies. So if anything bad happens, I do have a phone in the front row. But it's just an invitation to give yourself some time to just be free of the device in your pocket. Second, I would suggest sometime this week performing some kind of digital habits audit. Take some time to understand what habits you have so that you can take action in changing them. Dr. David Greenfield has this really great one called the Smartphone Compulsion Test. It will make you feel bad. I'm letting you know, it will make you feel bad. You can do it in like 10 minutes, but it will likely say you have an addiction to your smartphone. But it is really helpful to begin thinking through, how am I interacting with my phone? How am I interacting with my tablet? How am I interacting with these things? If you don't want to do that one, here are 3 simple questions. How many hours per day do you spend on digital devices? And is that where you want to be? I think the screen time notification for iPhones comes out on Sunday mornings, so you likely already saw yours for this past week. Is that the type of person you want to be? Second question, do you check your phone first thing in the morning and last thing before bed? And what does that say about us if that's the bookends of our day? And third, how often are digital devices distracting or getting in the way of the things you want? Relationships, friendships, prayer, church, work, etc. Take some time to think through these things. And then finally, as we continue this conversation, it's very likely we will come to different conclusions about these practices. And so maybe my last piece of advice is offer grace and patience to one another and to yourself. I know I just ranted for like 30 minutes on how bad technology is, and some of you are like sliding your phone back in your pocket. You're like, not going to touch that the rest of this time. That's really not, seriously, that is not the aim of this. The aim is for us to be a community that is intentional about the way in which we're engaging in these things. And that might mean that my convictions and my practices are vastly different than yours. The goal is not for us to have all the exact same passwords and practices on these things. The aim is for us each to individually, in the discernment of the Spirit, work to come to some sort of intentionality regarding our devices. Some of you will get really zealous, and this afternoon you're prepared to delete every distracting app from your phone. Good for you. Some of you may want to take 3 or 4 weeks to really think through what changes are you going to make so that they can be sustainable. I do